Good morning. Today we're going to do lesson 1-6, rounding decimals. I can round decimals to different places, and this rounding for decimals is the same way you round with whole numbers. You're rounding to a certain place value and looking to the right. It's the same process. So we'll go over that again. In science class, Marcy recorded numbers from an experiment as 12 and 87 hundredths, 12 and 13 hundredths, 12 and 5 tenths, and 12 and 8 hundredths. Which numbers are closer to 12, which are closer to 13, and how can you tell? So we can record these on a number line to help us out here. And we both see all of them have 13 in the ones place. So they're all going to be between 12 and 13. So we want to see which are closer to 12 and which are closer to 13. You can use structure to help determine what numbers is halfway between two whole numbers and show your work. So 12 point, let me get these numbers underlined a little bit. 12.87, 12.13, 12.5, 12.08. So I know that 12.5 is going to be right in the middle. So let me throw that one in first. And how do I know that's in the middle? And remember what you can do with numbers? You can always add, even after a whole number, you can add a 0 after a whole number. And 12.5 is halfway between 12 and 13. So I got rid of that one. Now 12.13, if I look at my number line here, I want to be aware of the intervals, which is what are they counting by in between. So if I start with 12, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So they're counting by tenths. You want to always be aware of that when you're looking at a number line. What are they counting by? What's in between the whole numbers? And in this case, it's tenths. So 12.13, I know 12.1 is going to be here. This will be 12.1. I put that above. This one will be 12.2, 12.3. Trying to write little here. 12.4, 12.5, 12.6, 12.7. Now you don't have to label your number line if you feel comfortable and you understand what you're doing, and you can place things without that. But for now, 12.13 is going to be a little bit after 12.1, like a third of the way between 12.1 and 12.2, because 3 is about a third of the way between 0 and 1. So I'll get rid of that one. 12.87, that's almost close to 12.9. So I'm going to put that probably really close to 12.9. And then 12.08 is smaller than 12.1. I'll put that right next to there. So now I've got them in order from least to greatest if I needed to do that. And you know that we can always write them in place value. Which was in the last lesson, to help us understand the place value order. So now we're going to talk a little bit about rounding. So let me give you a little preview here. When you're rounding, be aware of what you're rounding to. If you're looking at these four values, are you rounding to the nearest whole number, the nearest tenth, the nearest hundredth, and whatever you're told to round to? Sometimes it'll say round to the largest place value. You have to be clear what you're rounding to. When you're aware of what you're rounding to, then you can underline that value to help focus the process. So let's take a look. We got them all up there, looking awesome. Using a number line is another strategy you can use. It's a tool that can help you in rounding and in putting things in order. What is the halfway point between 12 and 13? Halfway between 12 and 13 is 12 and a half. And if you're not sure, just think of money, because you guys all are familiar with money. What's halfway between $12 and $13? it would be 1250. Okay, we're going to move on. Waiting for the computer to catch up with me. It doesn't want to move today. There we go. Oh, that went quickly. Nice. How can you round decimals? So now that we know how to place numbers on a decimal line, now we're going to talk about how do we round numbers, decimal numbers. Rounding replaces one number with another number that tells us about how many or how much. Round 2 and 36 hundredths to the nearest tenth. Is 2 and 36 hundredths closer to 2 and 3 tenths or 2 and 4 tenths? So they're telling you that they want you to round this number to the nearest tenth. So I would strongly advise you to underline the place value they want you to round to, because find the rounding place. Look at the digit to the right. So see how they underlined it here? It's important that you realize the number will stop there. It will stop in the tenths place. There will be nothing after the tenths place. Nothing. So we have to decide, is that 6 going to make the 3 stay the same, or is it going to make it go up? And in rounding, if you watch some of the little rounding videos, if the digit is 5 or greater, add 1 to the rounding digit. If the digit is less than 5, leave the rounding digit alone. So in this case, 6 is greater than 5, so it's going to bump the 3 up. So when we round this to the nearest tenths, the 6 is going to make the 3 go up to a 4, which is the next value. So 2 and 36 hundredths rounds to 2 and 4 tenths. And if you were to annex a 0 there, you would say that is the nearest hundredth. If you're rounding that to the nearest tenth, you'll get 2.4. Always know what place value you're rounding to. That's critical. Carrie said 448 rounds to 500 because 448 rounds to 450 and 450 rounds to 500. The problem with her example is she double rounded. When they're asking you to round to a certain place value, 448, if you want to round it to the nearest 100, you would look right next door, and the 4 is going to leave the 4 alone. In whole numbers, we do not drop digits. The only time we drop digits in the whole numbers, we replace with zeros. In decimals, when we're rounding a decimal, everything after the decimal has to disappear. Everything after the rounding place has to disappear. So we said this rounds to 2.4. In whole numbers, we don't just round 448 to 4, because that would mean 4 ones. We need to make sure we've got it in the right place value. So it rounds to 400. Be careful on that. That's the difference between whole numbers and decimals. Whole numbers, everything after the rounded number becomes a 0. In decimals, everything after the rounded number disappears. It's gone. We don't need it there. Okay, we're going to move on a little bit. And for more rounding help, make sure you're watching the videos. Some of you might need a refresher on rounding. Don't forget to watch the videos that are in when you browse in the lesson, in lesson 1-6, and you hit your browse button. You're going to see rounding decimals visual learning and rounding decimals another look. So make sure you take a look at those videos to help you with rounding. Also, look at the playlist that I pushed out for you. Another example, round 3 and 2 tenths to the nearest whole number. So if I have my numbers 3 and 2 tenths and I want to round to the nearest whole number, notice how it didn't say round to the ones place. It said the nearest whole number. So you're going to have to be really aware that things in math can be restated many different ways. The nearest whole number, in this case, is in the ones place. Sometimes it'll say the greatest whole number. Sometimes it'll say the largest whole number. So be careful on the language. It gets tricky. So we want to know, is 3.2 closer to 3 or closer to 4? And if the halfway point is 3.5, that's a good benchmark for us to get in our heads. So we can say, well, 3.5 is halfway. 3.2 is below that. So we're going to go with the whole number 3. Find the rounding place. Look at the digit to the right of the rounding place. In this case, it's a 2. If the digit is 5 or greater, add 1 to the rounding digit. If the digit is less than 1, leave the rounding digit alone. Since 2 is less than 5, leave the 3 the same. Drop the digits to the right of the decimal point. And drop the digits and drop the decimal point. So when we say what 3 and 2/10 rounds to 3 and 2/10 rounds to the whole number 3. Rounds to 3. And let's get down here a little bit and look at some guided practice questions. Again, do the guided practice, then you can go off into your buddy work if you'd like to have the tutorial and your work corrected as you go. Buddy work is a great place for that. If you would rather do it in your book and have a parent look at it and they have the time to do that, of course, that's something your family decides, but you can do the buddy practice, and that will let you know if you have something wrong or not. And if you do, you can go back into the videos and take a look to refresh your memory. And then we do the quick check. 2 rounds, but please try to do the guided practice in the book. These couple little problems before you go into the buddy work, or if you do the book work, the independent practice. To round 74 and 58 hundredths to the nearest tenth, which digit do you look at? If you want to round to the nearest tenth, of course you want to underscore what's in the tenths, and that's a 5 there. What is 74 and 58 hundredths rounded to the nearest tenth? So our value is 74 and 58 hundredths, and we are rounding to the nearest tenth, just right there. So we're going to get rid of that 8. Is the 8 going to make the 5 go up? Is it 5 or greater? Yes, it is. So we're going to wind up with 74.6. So that's rounded to the nearest tenth. A car rental service charges customers for the number of miles they travel. Rounded to the nearest whole mile, George travels 40 and 8/10 of a mile. How many miles would he be charged? So in this case, we want to round to the nearest whole number, whole mile, which would be right there. That's the nearest whole number. 40.8, the nearest whole number would be in the ones place. So the 8's going to actually make that 0 jump up, so that's going to round to 41 miles. And you use the rounding rules. And if you have to write, you really don't have much room to explain here. I would just go right up here and then circle what's at the top of the page, and that's your explanation. Round the following digit to the place, round each number to the place of the underlined digit. So we're rounding to the for number 3, we're rounding to the ones place, and the 5 is going to make the rounded number go up. So it's going to be 17. Rounding to the nearest, in this case, ones place. The 1 is less than 5, so we're just going to get rid of it, and that one just stays the same. It's going to be just 56. For number 5, rounding to the tenths place, the 2 is less than 5, so we're just going to get rid of it and rewrite your answer. And don't put a 0 at the end because you're stopping at the tenths place. For number 6, we're stopping at the tenths place, but the 8 is actually going to it's greater than 5, so it's going to make that 7 go up to 8. So we'll have 42.8. That's rounded to the nearest tenths. This guy is rounding, the second value is the hundredths place, so we're rounding to the hundredths. The 2 is less than 5, so you're just going to drop it, so we have 1.65. Number 8, rounding again to the tenths place. The 4, the guy to the left of him, is less than 5, so we're just going to drop it. So 582.5. 0.0. Now that one looks kind of weird, but you need to include the rounded place value there. Even though it says 0, and that looks like a really weird way to write 582, you're going to notice if you do the buddy work, they want a value in there. If you just put 582, the buddy work will most likely mark that wrong. The buddy work is a really good place to make sure you're precise in your answers. It's really annoying. It'll mark it wrong if you're not precise. So number 9, 80,547 and 645 thousandths. And we're rounding to the hundredths place. The 5 next door is going to make that 4 go up to 5. And then we rewrite the whole value. Don't forget your commas, separating your period. And the last one here, 135,701 and 949 thousandths, and we're rounding to the tenths place. So the 4 is going to disappear because it's less than 5. So we have 135,701.9. And there you have it. So off to your buddy work, or work on the bottom of the page here if you prefer, and get the quick check done today. Thank you.